this morning, let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into that enormous void that sucks at and corrodes the future that we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling out from the past that must come fully into the now, lest we falter and fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry memory and promise. Let us dance in the tension that we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with the possibility that emerges there. It is good to gather together.
Please join me in our chalice lighting that we read together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. At this time, I invite you to mindfully and respectfully greet one another.
Good morning again.
So in about 30 seconds from now, I understand. I figured you would, but you know, that's okay. You don't need to announce the hymn, you just start playing.
What's that? Oh, very good to see you too. I wanted to ask you about a person that's on my side.
How are you, Carol? I'm here. You know, we had to postpone the whole trip. And then I called my doctor, and he's been out since. I mean, the surgery, it seems awful to say, you know, you have to go.
These things get hot, don't they? As we move into our joys and concerns time this week, I'd like to light candles for two dear members whose deaths we learned about this week. Longtime member Carol Gensert passed away recently, according to her son Chris. Most recently, she was living with her daughter. Carol was a longtime member and very active in our congregation. A celebration of life will be held at a later time, the details of which we'll share as we learn them. We also hold Joan Milder, a member of the choir who passed away November 7th in her apartment at the Alcazar. We hold Carol and Joan in loving memory and hold their families and loved ones in light and caring. This book lives in the narthex just outside of the sanctuary, and until just before the time of joys and concerns, so that those who would wish to have their joys or sorrows be shared aloud during this time may write down what's in their hearts. Normally we would begin this time with that. This week we had no entries, but I wanted to have a visual aid to show you what to look for should you come in and want to share something. So during our meditation music, I invite you to come forward to drop a glass stone into our bowl to express any joys or concerns. If you're participating on Facebook, feel free to add comments to express your joys and concerns there as well. And put one final stone in our goal to represent all of those joys and concerns that have yet to find a voice, that remain in the quiet sanctuaries of our hearts. And for those being experienced by members and friends of our community who are not with us in body today.
Check, check, check. Hello. Good morning. We are here today with our guest speaker, guest minister, Elaine Strawn. And Elaine and I were chatting, and Elaine brought in something she mentioned just in passing. She had this old pot that she wasn't sure what to do with anymore. She was thinking about throwing it out. Can you tell us a little bit about this old pot?
Don't look at the bottom,
Okay.
because it's rusty.
As a little rusty. Sorry about that.
So there's this thing about iron skillets. That was my grandmother's.
So it's old. Everyone's grandmother is old. There's no young grandmothers.
And she always comes with it. And we tried to throw it away time and time again.
Yeah.
But now it's my grandmother. But when I pick it up, it's heavy. And when you cook things in it, they get stuck. And I just really want to throw it.
And it's real tempting to throw it away because these are not that expensive, right? You can easily get a cast iron pot like this, $20, especially hey, go to like Goodwill or a place like that, you can find one, they're real cheap. But this is really, that's why I wanted to bring it in, is because this is actually a really interesting thing, really interesting phenomenon, because all the stuff that makes you want to throw this out, all of that is its history. This is the history of this pan. Of all those meals your grandmother made, of all those different dishes that got made out of it. And what's interesting is history is always like this. There's always the incentive to toss it. Right? History sometimes. You want to get rid of it. Throw it right out. But at the same time, history can become something different. If we confront it, if we take care of it, if we work on it a little bit, and then take that thing that is where the history happens, it can actually have the most remarkable and miraculous thing, a future. So this pot is actually really special in that sense, because this thing can take a beating. I mean, it is in the same ways. In fact, my arm's getting very tired as I'm holding it. I really sometimes wish I had thought to have somewhere to put this, but I didn't. So my fault, no problem. But at the same time, to have this, especially to have this have a future, it needs just a little care and attention. So this is where I get a little nerdy here, because this is all very true about cast iron. So people get really freaked out by cast iron. My house, my wife is like, I don't clean the cast iron. She makes me do it. Like, no matter who's cooked in it, it's my job. And the reason is this. You gotta season a cast iron piece of cooking, and most people know that. If you've ever used one before. And seasoning is not a complicated thing, but it is something you have to take just a little care about. So the first thing to do, especially with the whole pan, you gotta, of course, address all that history. So if there's rusty parts, if there's burnt on parts, gotta scrub that out, gotta brush it up, gotta confront all of those past elements, and you gotta move forward. The next thing you gotta do in order to season it is you have to get some oil. Now technically, it is said flaxseed oil is the best for this. The problem is flaxseed oil goes bad like in a week. So unless you have access to lots of flaxseed oil, you want to use like a canola oil or something. And you're gonna spread this around in this pan, you're gonna wipe every possible cranny on this pot, and you're gonna put it upside down in your oven, low temperature, 300 degrees, and you're gonna let it just simmer, just cook with the oil on top of it. And what happens is that the oil polymerizes onto the cast iron and creates this protective layer that allows you to use this now in a way that doesn't damage the pot. And all that it costs is a little bit of upkeep. You gotta just make sure this is not the kind of thing you want to stick in your dishwasher and let air dry. Water is the enemy of any kind of raw metal like cast iron. So you want to make sure you just hand wash it. Soap is actually totally fine. Some people get real freaked out about soap. But actually, as long as you're not using a heavy lye soap, which is not, we almost no longer have any soaps that are like that, it's actually pretty easy to just wash out and then dry it by hand, make sure you get all the water, and then you should be in absolute great shape.
Thank you.
Yes.
So now I'm gonna keep.
You're going to keep the box. You're going to hold on to it.
If you give it back to me.
I suppose I will, especially now that my arm is aching. So here you go.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
When Elaine was telling me about this part of the service, I was letting her know about the new enameled cast iron pans. So we haven't discovered those yet. No seasoning involved. I invite you into a time of meditation and reflection. Make yourself comfortable, and I'll share with you these words written by Martha Valentine, a UU minister in Massachusetts, from a book of meditations entitled A Long Time Blooming. This one is called Gratitude to My Ancestors. With honor and respect, these eyes see for you all manner of life you could not have imagined. My lips move with the rhythm of your words flowing through me, my tongue caressing each morsel of wisdom I am graced to pass on. Your DNA raises my veins, and with every breath I take, your cautious steps from the past toward a fuller life become bold moves I make toward my destiny. Together, we wrap arms around a new generation, here to become who they were born to be, to cast their magic as we once did, and bless each day for their ability to do so. For you, dear ancestors, we live this day. This week, the beneficiary of our offertory is Policy Matters Ohio. It's a nonprofit policy research institute that seeks to create a more vibrant, equitable, sustainable, and inclusive Ohio through research, strategic communications, coalition building, and policy advocacy. And that's a mouthful, so let me break it down. Their work falls into 4 major areas and related buckets. First is a fair economy, so in other words, good jobs, worker rights, smart training, and opportunity for all. Second, a quality Ohio, which means adequate and fair taxes to support the schools, neighborhoods, and infrastructure we all need. Next, sustainable communities, investments in transit, renewable energy, conservation, and other smart solutions that create jobs and support communities. And finally, shared prosperity, thriving Ohioans, which is reasonable regulations to help families earn and save, build assets, avoid unfair loans, and build a better future for themselves and their children. So as always, please give generously within your means, either contributing to the collection bowls as they come around, or using the Cash App on your phone, the information for which is in your order of service.
I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be free. I will bow and be humble. Yes, bow at the willow tree. I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be free. I will bow and be humble. If I is the tree, I will bow and kiss the token. I will bow and kiss the token. Yea, will bow and be broken. Yea, I'll fall upon the rock. I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be free. I will bow and be broken. 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 Yea, will bow and be broken. Yea, I'll fall upon the rock. I will bow, this is the token. I will wear the easy yoke. I will bow and I'll be broken. Yea, I will fall upon the rock. I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be simple. I will bow and be grateful. I will bow, this is the token. I will wear the easy yoke. I will
Please join me with the words in order of service as we accept our gifts. We offer these gifts with gratitude, and we acknowledge the constant gifts of time, talent, and treasure that strengthen and nourish this congregation as a reflection of our commitment to community within and without, our purposeful spirituality that is ever searching and growing, and our intentional actions that lead to greater justice in our congregation, our city, our nation, and our world.
There are two pieces that I chose to read this morning that may seem a little odd, but follow along with me. The first comes from the British neurologist and medical historian Oliver Sacks, who, interestingly, was the son of one of the very first female surgeons, who was evacuated during the Blitz, who lived on turnips during the Second World War, and then came back to some of the worst stories from British boarding schools before he went off to a kibbutz for healing, and bringing him back to himself. And Oliver Sacks is known for lots of the books that he wrote, but I want to quote from Lawrence Weschler's biography, And How Are You, Dr. Sacks? First, he quotes Oliver Sacks himself. Biologically, physiologically, we are not so different from each other. Historically, as narratives, we are each of us unique. And then Weschler says, Oliver was asking as hard as a person can, who are you? I need to know. I need to know more. I need to know even more. And then his attention somehow would release people. He would take his thread of them and pull slowly out. But what he also did simultaneously, and this was the great part, he pulled the whole world in the other way by telling us their stories. Remembrances of him resonate like notes of magnificent pipe organ in a grand concert hall. You repeatedly hear Sacks asking his patients, how are you? Just as I plainly see him greeting them with a soft, lingering touch. A shoulder rubbed, a hand held, fingers caressed or kissed. Oliver Sacks met his patients one person at a time. One mystery at a time, one story at a time. And the story was always valuable, whether or not he had the full details. And then stepping away from the individual and quoting from Isabel Wilkerson, Dr. Isabel Wilkerson, who is known to us best for her research that led to her book, Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents. This is a little piece of what she wrote about history. Choose not to look at your own peril. The owner of an old house knows that whatever you are ignoring will never go away, nor the rust on the bottom of my grandmother's pan. Whatever is lurking will fester whether you choose to look or not. Whatever is calling your attention will. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of inaction. Whatever you are wishing away will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what you would rather not see. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's greetings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We're the Spirit of God. Latin spiritus. Hebrew ruach. English breath. We sit at a funny time in history. We sit at a time when we remember what happened before. We're not sure what's happening now. And we have no clue what's going to happen in the future. And so much of it focuses on breath and falling microphones. We wear masks because we don't want to contaminate others with our breath, or in reality, any germs that we might hold. Nor do we want to receive theirs. We live at a time in which we're still in great emotional and cultural self-examination after the death of George Floyd, screaming, "I can't breathe." Breath. The Spirit of God, the Ruach, the inner dwelling of our own wisdom, sits with us as we look at history. The New York Times was very good this week in bringing up interesting historical pieces. One of them was the story of their own book about the 1619. Nicole Hannah-Jones in January of 2019 walked into the editor's office and said, "I think on the 400th anniversary of bringing an enslaved people from Africa onto these shores at the same time that we were trying to build a nation on freedom, that needs to be examined, that the impact of that needs to be examined." And so she brought that to the editors. And they said, "That's great, do that." And the newspapers flew off the shelf until they didn't. Until the backlash started. Until we began to look as a nation at what our history dealing with that particular issue is. We started to look at the people who said, "How can we form a democracy when we're enslaving an entire group of people?" And others who said, "But if we write about that, we won't be strong anymore." And the debate went on and goes on. One side, the other side, one president and another president reactions, until it has an effect in the current world, possibly, probably, on a gubernatorial election in the state of Virginia. The same state that just took down a statue of Robert E. Lee. History is an amazing thing. The other article that they had, review actually of a book by Graeber and his colleague, whose name just flew right out of my head. The Dawn of Everything. 700 pages. You might want to go out and grab a copy this afternoon. I might wait for the cliff notes, but the review was very interesting. Because what these two researchers found, these two anthropologists found, through lots and lots of research and 65 pages of footnotes, That should impress Unitarian Universalists. Is that rather than being simply a hunting and gathering culture, series of cultures, and then going into an agrarian series of cultures, that there was complexity all along, to the point that they even surmise that some of the European Enlightenment involved a conversation between the indigenous people of this continent, analyzing the good parts and the frustrations of that Enlightenment history. It's a fascinating thing. And maybe we made history as a world again yesterday, when COP26 lasted an extra day, maybe pushed a little farther, became the very first time that there was a statement condemning fossil fuels, not enough yet to say how much we're going to lower them, and not enough yet to say how we're going to contribute to the developing world, but a statement and a promise to meet again in another year. History is happening all around us, and it isn't everything is the same. We're stuck in a COVID malaise, and everything is changing all at the same time. So why the two texts that I chose? What does it matter? So I chose Oliver Sacks because it seems to me that a lot of the issues that strike us in history, that come back to bite us, our inability to listen well to everyone around. Oliver Sacks was very famous for going to people and saying, tell me about you, tell me about your pain, tell me about what condition you have been diagnosed with, and then let me ask more questions of them. And so he found things. For instance, in Charles Barret disease, it can be caused, hallucinations can be caused by blindness. The mind continues to think. We often have a prejudice about hallucinations. When we really go and talk to people and pull them out, what are the things that we didn't know before that will enlighten us, that will allow us to operate together? Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin, somebody with a disease, right? Somebody with a disease at that point called autism, and Oliver Sacks went and had deep conversations. And what did we learn? We learned how animals can be calm or calmed. We're about to be slaughtered. Not a pretty story, but it's a real story. How do we help in trauma? What are the paradoxical pieces that we can gain when the brain works in that particular way that we can't find any other way? Oliver Sacks was a person who said, I want to know you. I want to know more about you. I want to know you more deeply. He went through the diseases. The man who mistook his wife for a hat because of the condition of the eyes. He discovered in Guam an environmental issue that was causing a terrible disease among that population, made up of symptoms from ALS and dementia and Parkinson's, all put together in the same body. Because he asked, you are making history here. How well do you know the folks around you? How well do any of us, how well do I know my neighbors? You know, I'm engaged in a practice right now of trying to open my heart, but it is about stopping some of the judgments that are going on. And it's simple things. My neighbors who pay so much attention to the grass, how much fertilizer and potable water does it take for them to grow their grass? And I move right down there with a huge judgment, which doesn't build a bridge between me and my neighbors. Build a fence. We do that consistently. How do we affect history? Oliver Sacks could go further than that. And then Isabel Wilkerson, journalist, professor in the notable universities of this country. They all are, I know, but Emory and Yale and the ones that we often think of. And what she did was take a wider view, and she said, if we look at history this big, what do we see? What's causing us to function in the divisive way that we function? What do we see? And what she saw was a caste system in this which we think of as democracy, and I know you've all read it. But not one that can be argued with, because of course it's God's will or it's the rule of nature. And most tragic, it is the one that penalizes folks from the disenfranchised castes if they succeed. And the physiological studies talk about body changes that happen to people who live under that kind of pressure. So that's personal ramification. The cultural ramification then becomes how we subvert the possibilities in our culture because we don't want everyone to have the blessing. So we struggle with healthcare because we're not sure everyone is deserving. There was a report in the Washington Post about the city of Louisville, Kentucky, that said they could help their city budget if they did two things. One of them was if they worked on, and we need to be careful with this one, if they worked on police enforcement. And the after effect of that would be how much money they would save in lawsuits and in defending city employees. And the other one would be if we simply raised the salaries of people of color and of disenfranchised people across the board, the amount of tax dollars that the city would receive could pull them up. Sounds far too simple, but I read it in the Washington Post. So I come here, and I did a little bit of homework before I came, so I know a couple of things. I know that you weren't founded in 1648 with the Cambridge Platform, but I know that you started gathering in people's houses, not you personally, in people's houses in 1830. And in 1849, I think, started the Church of Unity. What a great phrase. That soon after that, you built a building downtown, Prospect, that you called two life partner women ministers. I personally am excited about that. Florence Buck and Marion Murdoch are heroes of the Iowa Sisterhood and what some of my friends would call the real Midwest. And they came here and served, and their pictures are hanging in your home. You continue. You were one of the leaders in the reasonable religion movement at the end of the 19th century when when humanism was rising and rising in our movement. You worked on women's suffrage. You helped to found AA. In 1950, you had a terrible decision to make. Do we stay where we are or do we move? And there was a disagreement. Some of you stayed and some of you moved. And the ones who moved in the 1960s became founders and community workers on integration in Shaker Heights. And those of you who stayed and finally moved to Lancashire were doing the same kinds of social services in that neighborhood, eventually coming to the things that I know about, like work at Musicians Tower and community group. You have been active, your history. On this land that has the energy coming up from the Erie and the Iroquois and the Seneca nations and others, on this land where that energy is rising, you have added yours. Because in 2019, you came back together and founded an old and a new congregation simultaneously. And so I wonder, just those two things, as you build, how will you ask? How will you listen? How will you welcome? How will you be the Oliver Sacks of this congregation? How will you say, I want to know more? How will you find the quiet person in the back of the room or the new person who may come in with a stellar idea? How will you listen and ask? How will you look at how you organize yourselves and how you welcome? How will you include the voices? And how will you always be examining whether we're doing this the best way, creating the best laboratory for human behavior to be present in this community and in larger group. Because we embrace history. History was and history is as we make it. But the most important question from history is, what will our mission be as we're walking into the future? Who are we becoming in 2025 and 2050 and in the year 3000? You'll be here. I know you will. And you'll be vital. You'll be asking questions and you'll be welcoming new people and being present. You'll do that because of the way that you're encountering one another as you move on. And so, my life goes on with endless song. How can I keep from singing?
taking off my reading glasses, still my hats. So before we read our COVID covenant, it seemed like a timely place to share something new that we're trying for social hour that ties in with our COVID covenant. And this is still a work in progress. This is the first week we're trying this, so bear with us as we work out the kinks. For those of you who would like to stay after the service to catch up with friends inside the building, now that it's getting chilly, we ask that you take a colored ticket. As it says here, from one of the 3 baskets here at the front, which do not exist, because since then we created 3, there they are, this is what they look like, and there'll be some just outside the door here, like Fana. And then there's some on the table in the very back in case you go out that way. And these are tickets that will give you admission to one of the rooms inside the building to visit with your fellow congregants. There are a limited number of tickets in each basket based on the number of people that room can safely hold. That means every member of your pod, or whoever you know you would like to visit with, needs to have their own ticket, and if people in your pod need supervision, make sure that you all have the same color ticket, unless you've made some other arrangements ahead of time. After the service ends, you'll choose whether to stay for social hour by taking, you'll choose whether to stay for social hour by taking a colored ticket and joining up in the room matching your ticket, or leave the building, socialize outside, or go on with the rest of your day, your choice. So the blue ticket will be for Fellowship Hall. The yellow color ticket will be for the worship center. And the green color tickets will be for this back area, narthex in the back of the sanctuary. So wherever you choose to be, please remember to be masked, socially distanced, and respect the colored dots on the name tag in terms of people's comfort level. And now if you would join me in reading our in the London community, we welcome everyone, absolutely everyone, into this space of worship and fellowship. In this time of pandemic, we covenant to respect one another by considering the safety and comfort of others before ourselves, to respect the policies our leadership has established, and to take all of our steps with one another with grace and understanding as we work to make this a truly safe space for everyone.
My colleague, Reverend Tanya Marquez, wrote the words that we use for our benediction today. The call from the past. From the heights of the Andes, jungle, and the desert, from the depth of the sea, from a time that was, from a time that stretches beyond our memory, we are called. Our histories stretch back to the first people, the first steps, the collision of worlds, to abrupt beginnings, all wanderers of this land. We have inherited the unfinished labor of our ancestors, of those that came before us. We are called to continue this work.
Call from the present. The voices of our people call us now. The world harbors their joys and their sorrows. We hear the cries of our people demanding justice. In that call, we recognize the voices of those who wander in the desert, the border crossers, the navigators, the justice seekers, the dreamers, and the hopeful. We weave our story to the story of our ancestors right here, right now. We are in the midst of responding to the call that comes from all the corners of this land, from the south, the north, the east, and the west. We are called to sustain the work.
Called from the future. The voices of those who will be call us, a reminder of who we need to be. In the weaving of our story to the web of life, we must remember that we must not cut the strings, for there are others coming after us. Others with tender hearts and strong wills, with creative determination. Those who will live in the house of tomorrow. Their vision escapes us, yet we are called to prepare the road, to leave behind possibility and foundations upon which they'll build a better tomorrow. We are called to create new opportunities.
And now, if you'll join me in the Chalice Extinguishing words in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Love is little, love is low. Love will make our spirits grow, grow in peace, grow in light. Love will do the thing that's right. Love is little, love is low. Love will make our spirits grow. Love will make our spirits grow. Love will do the thing that's right. Love will do the thing that's right. Love will make our spirits grow. Love will make our spirits grow. Love will do the thing that's right. Love will do the thing that's right. Love will do the thing that's right. Love will do the thing that's right.